Good evening, everyone. I am delighted to host today's session in conversation with Smriti Khanna. Hi,
Hi,
Smriti.
hi. Such
Uh,
such a privilege to be here and to speak with you, Bhavana.
I, I've been having all kinds of feelings about this conversation. And I have to say that I have been looking forward to it. At the same time, I have been, you know, a little in anticipation, a mix of feelings. I'm glad that we connected and you reached out to me on LinkedIn. I want you to start by introducing yourself and telling us how you landed up with Caregiver Sathi.
Sure. So just a brief background about me, Bhavana. First of all, we share our alma mater, XLRI Jamshedpur. It is through the alumni group that I got to know about Caregiver Sathi. But honestly speaking, I wasn't an active consumer or listener of the content that was out there through your platform till last 1.5 year back. So 1.5 year back, my mother got diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, which had spread across her bones. And from then started my journey of being a caregiver. And it is during this time period that I really found a lot of strength, a lot of courage while going through some of the stories and content that was shared with through Caregiver Sati, and I found a lot of courage in that. And that's how it started. And I wanted to really thank you when I reached out to you on LinkedIn. That thank you for doing what you are doing, because directly, indirectly, without even knowing, you are reaching out to people um, who really need to hear some of those things.
Yeah, I get gooseflesh when in moments like this. So I'm glad that it was helpful and it meant something to you. And I can imagine that, it can be a little bit of an effort to rewind and go back to your caregiving journey. But the point of this conversation is to be able to share our caregiving journeys and to normalize what is often invisible or perhaps kept under wraps.
That is so true. And when you say kept under wrap, I really feel it, because even in my network, I'm pretty sure that once my mom passed away, I was not comfortable sharing with a lot of my friends and colleagues of what has happened, because I felt a little uncomfortable. And I think that's how somehow our construct is like that, being in the society, being in the stage and age where we are. So I totally feel that we should come out, we should share this and normalize these kind of conversations and the support that is needed by the people.
So please take us through your journey.
Um, okay, so as I shared, around 1.5 year ago, my mom used to have some of the health concerns which we initially thought were were just part of aging. She was already a hypertensive patient with diabetes and obesity. So a lot of symptoms that were coming up were considered to be pretty usual with the age for such patients. But somehow, what started in Feb 2019 as just usual symptoms, then quickly spiraled into diagnosing that she has a stage 4 breast cancer, and we couldn't identify a lot of symptoms that were coming up earlier. And it has spread to her bones, and it has metastasized across her body. Um, and unfortunately, what happened is she was somebody who was an extremely independent individual who used to literally be the bread earner and used to run the family. And suddenly she's on bed and she has a shock like this. Till now, she was very positive. What came as a shocker was because of the metastasis in bone, physiologically, she got a fracture without even a shock. And that fracture was on the strongest bone of your body, which is leg femur. And she was bedridden in June 2019. And post that, it's a journey where she, as a patient, was going through a lot. She finally succumbed to it in November 20. But during this entire journey, there were few things that I learned as a caregiver. Uh, One is that, especially in chronic patients, and I feel that is the case even when you have, mental mental health conditions as well. I think what happens is the fight is of patient, but at the same time you get heavily involved in it, and you can't do much about it. You can give them a lot of care, you can be patient with them, but at the same time the journey of healing is of the patient. Now, when like I get directly, indirectly involved, or my family members get involved, we realized we also go through exhaustion of our own kind. And I realized, especially in our social construct, caregiver exhaustion or compassion fatigue is something that is not accepted or is not really acknowledged. More than accepted, it's not acknowledged. And which is where I started having these issues of whom to go to, whom should I go and discuss this with. And at this point of time, I'll actually thank Caregiver Sati, because I used to feel that it is only me who's having this. I'm getting tired of constantly being a caregiver or constantly being patient with the patient. And when I went through some of these stories, I realized, no, it's not the case. I think everybody at one point or the other goes through it. The importance is to share, to seek support, and distribute your workload in a way that you do get some breather and time for self. Somehow it so happens in Indian society, if you are a caregiver, if you're a family member, you are supposed to give 100% of yourself. And in that process, we stop loving our own selves. Our social support system also restricts. I can't go at this age where I am. I felt that I couldn't go to my friends and talk to them about this grim subject. Suddenly it will bring down the energy level of a room or a setting or a conversation. And a lot of times my friends would not know what to say in these kind of conditions. So my social support system also kind of shrunk. And at this point of time, I realized, speaking to a lot of people who have gone through this kind of journey really helps. The journey is definitely difficult, and nobody else apart from the patient and the family member go through it. But yeah, it is difficult. And I think it became more difficult when her cancer spread to her brain. Like when she was physically not okay, she still had a lot of willpower and courage, my mother. That, I will get back. And she was a teacher who used to be motivating her students, and she imbibed that motivation in her own self, saying that, I will go back to school, I'll go back to teaching. Teaching is my one good passion. And she really did that for a couple of days in between in 2020 during COVID time, when there were online classes, and she was super happy. But when the cancer spread to her brain is when you realize the journey becomes even more difficult, because now you don't know what are her lucid moments and what are not. What is the point at which you are actually cutting across your message to her and where not? You as a caregiver, you stop even realizing what should I say and what I should not. That judgment is also lost when you have mind which gets involved in the ailment. And my heart goes out for people actually who deal with their family members who have mental health issues as well, because it is that much more difficult to deal with this.
Yeah. November 2020, it's just, it, it's so recent. And I, as I listened to you, I was thinking about the time when nearly 21 years ago, I lost my dad. I don't think I could have articulated my experience and my journey as beautifully as you have.
Maybe Bhavna, you can share your thoughts around how did you deal with it? Because 20 years ago, I'm guessing you would be around the same age and stage that I am. So
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think I was similar. A couple of years out of campus. And, but I do think that I want to compliment you for being able to have this conversation so soon. And I want you to know that I think it's incredible that you are able to articulate your experience and feelings. I think for me, it was a little bit of a, you know, I think I numbed myself. I just wanted to get on with life. And it was so hard. I relate with the fact that, you know, I was on campus and when my dad was unwell. And it just felt so difficult to connect with my friends and peers because they just wouldn't, they, with their best intentions, they wouldn't be able to understand. Um, and I think I didn't make much of an effort to help them understand either. I mean, I think I was quite secretive. Um, so I kind of held back a lot. Um, so in your being able to talk about it, at least even now, I think you are taking a big step. So uh, that's
and
incredible.
and I'll give it to you, Bhavna, that you are taking that step of uh, you know making us come and share our experiences. I can't thank you enough, and I think I've emphasized it multiple times, but I really can't thank you enough on how some of these stories really touch and tell you that hey, it's okay. You'll sail through this with some sport, and you'll sail through this.
Yeah.
And it's not you are not the only one who's going through this, because sometimes I feel at some points of time, even during the caregiving journey, I used to feel, why me? Why
Mm,
is it on me? You start
mm,
questioning that, and you realize you're not the only one.
mm.
While it's not a good thing to share, but you also know that when you share, you kind of share your burden, your emotions with others, and that makes it better.
Yeah. No, it does. It does. And I'm glad that you found some meaning through whether you heard stories here or you had access to, I'm sure, many other platforms or opportunities to be able to learn from each other. Would you want to share with us and so many others who might be inspired and learn from you? Uh, Maybe a critical incident or a moment in your journey that when you look back on, you think was a turning point?
Mm, uh, See, honestly, I think every human being goes through that cycle of defiance, and then you accept it, and then you move on. I think every caregiver goes through that cycle in different ways, and I also had a similar thought as I was sharing. Initially the thoughts used to be like, why me? I'm not ready for it. I didn't sign up for this. These are the kind of emotions that come to you. And then there is an acceptance that nobody who goes through this sign up for this. Nobody wants to go through this. But this is what the reality is, no matter how harsh. Um, and and there's also a realization that your support system is very restricted to people whom you can go and try your heart out and say that, it's getting too much for me. uh, is very restricted, but you kind of start cherishing those people. You start recognizing that these are your lifelines. I think the critical point for for me during this journey was definitely when COVID hit, and we started realizing that we can't take my mom for to the facility meant hospital or the facility medical facility very frequently, because she is a person with comorbidities and very high risk, and her chemo and target therapy would require a lot of care. So how do you really kind of adjust with this changed reality, as if everything was not difficult to manage everything on bed for her? There's suddenly this added risk of COVID and managing everything at home. um, that was one point where we realized that things are not going to be easy for anyone, and you kind of share your workload. So like my sister was there, I have an elder sister, and I have my father. We would share responsibilities amongst each other so that we don't get exhausted, and we became resourceful in a way that we would go out, find full-time maid who would come during COVID time and stay with us. There's a risk of running that, ensuring that there's a good nurse who can come and administer the target therapy to her. And finding none of it was very easy, especially given that it was not a metro town. Um, so that was one point. And I think the second point that came was when the cancer actually spread to my mother's brain, and she uh, started having conversations which were a little unusual. And we started realizing that no matter what we are trying to tell her, if we say that try this, it's not going to cut across her. She's not really willing to do this. There would be some days when she's super active. There would be days when she's extremely lethargic. She's not wanting to do anything. How do you deal with those things? And that has made me dealing with those last 6-7 months really made me more empathetic towards patient and people who are taking care of this. In general, it increased my empathy towards anything in life, because that is when you start realizing that how much important it is to speak with empathy, to reach out with empathy to people who are going through difficult times, and it could be in multiple format. And it also increased my patience, because that was like dealing with a kid. She almost became a kid for me and my sister. It was like dealing with a kid who doesn't want to accept, who is not mature enough to understand what we are talking about, but is going through a lot physiologically. uh, so so yeah, those were two turning points in the journey. Increased my patience, increased my empathy. Even at workspace, I had a couple of my colleagues who were going through this, and I realized to them I became so much more stronger support system, because I had a relatable experience to share with them.
We are both not just from the same alma mater, we are in the same profession. So I have so many leads from what you've just said. So what do you think, what would you have liked for your organization to do, or what would have felt like support from the organization given you were going through what you were going
Uh, so that's a very beautiful point, Bhavna. I worked in I have not worked in so many organizations, but couple of organizations I had worked in, and I could very clearly see the current organization where I was working during this tenure had really supported me by making exceptions which are not very usual. So in terms of flexibility, when to work, how to work, from where to work, To, during COVID times, ensuring that I'm fully supported emotionally, more emotionally than physically or financially, because I think everybody was going through a difficult time. And it is at that point of time I also realized how each aspect in life makes a huge difference.
Mm,
So there was workplace where I felt there was a lot of financial stress across the company because of COVID. But that is when you have angels like, it's a very small example. But my landlord, for example, in Bangalore, I stay in Bangalore and my hometown is in Ahmedabad. My landlord came and said, you know what, I'll forego your rent till the time you come back. And
wow.
it suddenly took away my financial stress at a great level, because rent used to be a considerable part of my spending. Similarly, at workplace, people would just come in and say, "Hey, you know what? This is a big project that you are dealing. This is a great presentation that you are supposed to present to senior leaders, and don't worry, we have taken care of it. Take care of your mom first, and we're not going to hold it against you." Even before COVID, if I'll say I want to work from home for 7 days or 10 days, they'll just go and say, "Go ahead and do it. Do it in late in the night. To work at late." So those kind of flexible aspects make a huge difference. And I'm not saying that each organization will be able to. Sometimes these organizations have constraints, uh, but sure intent to support goes a long way. And each colleague coming out and taking turns to check up on your health, to see how you're doing, makes a huge difference. Just checking once in a while if you're doing okay. How are you as a person, and not just your mom who's the patient. That makes
Yeah,
a huge difference.
it does. Indeed. People who are the support system for caregivers or are the companions or the pillars of strength in our world are the caregiver sathis, right?
Yeah.
So one of my deep desires is that organizations that are caring organizations and that want to respect their employees as whole human beings, not just recognize how much performance an individual can deliver, but recognize all the aspects of their employees and embrace the fact that some of them can be caregivers. Um, and I am delighted to hear that not only did you have the openness to share at your workplace, you also got the support. Um,
It was actually very unique situation, Bhavna. So being in HR, you also hear a lot of such stories about employees who come and make these requests.
yeah,
And uh, and I saw that people around me in my own team were extremely empathetic towards these conditions and situations. We had experiences where a new joiner is there, and within 2 months of joining, the person has some critical condition at home, because of which they have to full time take care of their family members. And we gave them 6, 6, 7, 7 months of leaves, even when they have joined, when we even don't know whether they'll come back or not.
yeah,
But we realized, treating them as a person, as you said, as whole person and an individual, is far more important than treating them as just a resource who is working at your workplace. That's so important. And
yes, it is. It is. And I think we need to recognize, and I'm delighted to hear that because in many cases and in many situations, I have heard that not only are individuals tentative about sharing, their caregiving responsibilities at the workplace, so are organizations because, people in organizations, or at least traditional, historically, organizations would like to say, that, I'm only interested in that part of you that brings the competence and the performance and the productive part of you to work. Um, but it's great if there are organizations that are caring and that offer you flexibility and uh, uh, support during this time of your journey. If you look back on your journey and look at it, from some of the other people who were involved. Let's say your dad and your sister and yourself. Um, how do you think you were all different?
Oh, we were very, very different, I think. So just to give you a little context, I have a small nephew also who is 7 years old right now, and we were all staying under one roof. Uh, we had kind of identified what we are good at. So particularly, I wasn't good at a lot of telephonic coordination and you know ensuring integrities are in place. I wasn't that person so much. My sister was. She was extremely good at coordinating 100 different things at the same time, and she took on that responsibility and said, you know what, I'll take care of this. I'll take care of ensuring physically all the resources are there with you. I said, okay, go amongst all of us, I'll go and ensure that I take care of all the financial resources that we may need during this time. And together between me and my father, we would take turns to go to hospital to attend to my mom, and my sister would take care of the entire household along with her son. We also have I also have my paternal grandmother with us, who is pretty aged, and she's above 80, so she also needs a specific set of care just due to the age. And my sister would take care of all of this at the back end and at the front end, with hospitals, with medicines, with doctors. Me and my father would ensure we are there. And my father took on the responsibility of being emotionally there with her partner, uh, where somewhere we felt that she was leaning on to him the most amongst all three of us. So we ensured he's most available in terms of emotional support to her. So we kind of figured out how each one of us, what we are good at, what we can really do for a elongated period of time, and whenever required, we'll chip in for one another. um, I I remember this one instance when we said that, in order for me to go and work, we would require a full time caretaker who could at least ensure that somebody is there with the patient all the time. Uh, and in the societal construct that we are, suddenly my mom's first reaction at that point of time was, "You can't leave me. You can't leave me. And you're my daughter. You're supposed to look after me." And I said, "I am looking after you, but in a different format than it is perceived by you." So it took us some time to come out of that role that an ideal daughter or son cannot manage both home and work and this and that. You need support system. And similarly, like, my sister would come and ensure that, let's say, a caregiver is coming, she's trained, she knows what to give to the caretaker. We are taking care of the caretaker themselves, because they also go through the same level of exhaustion, and we chip in wherever required. So uh, so that's how we divided our roles and responsibilities, so that none of us really get burdened.
Yeah.
In between, we would also tell each other, take a breather, because it's becoming too much for you. Father, for example, is also above 60. He's also a senior citizen, so there's so much that he can do physically. So we'll tell him, rest easy. Your maximum support would be emotional support rather than physical support. So that's how we divided our responsibilities, and we are different individuals in terms of dealing with her. And I think also because of the roles that we were having in our lives, in her life rather, uh, it changed. As a partner, my father was more expected to be her side, and she also leaned on him so much. From as daughters, she looked at us like somebody who is independent. She took a lot of pride in the fact that both of her daughters were independent and could take care of her.
Yes.
That was a peace, or consolation, or solace, as you may call it, during her last few days, that my daughters took care of me, took good care of me as much as they could in their capacity. uh, so yeah, that's how uh, that's how it has been for my family.
It's a conversation that we can have for a very long time, and I'm going to be a little mindful of the time that we
You
have.
should, you should.
Um, I'd like you to do two things. One, how would you like to honor not just the memory of your mom? Let's take that first.
Okay, it's very difficult to summarize because uh, for me, okay, so here's the thing: she shares her name with you, so that makes it that more special. This conversation becomes that more special. So for me, Bhavana Khanna was an individual in herself. And you see your mother as a person, as an individual who is also working and evolving and is going through a lot. And also, you look at her as mother. So, when you differentiate these two things, you start appreciating a lot as individual and mother both. Um, for me as mother, she was somebody who was always there for us. She was the essential number one bread earner in our family. And while being a bread earner, she ensured she's there for her daughters. Dance classes, karate classes, swimming classes, all the whims and fancies that we had when we were kids. And also ensure that we study. She'll review our homeworks before we go to school once again next morning. She was a superwoman. She'll ensure that as a daughter-in-law, she'll take care of her parents-in-law and her parents. Uh, so she was somebody who was striving to be a superwoman all this while. And obviously that came with health consequences because she never gave time to her own self. And that's where I moved to an individual. I sometimes with what she did right and sometimes what wherever there were lags, I learned a lot from her as an individual. She always told me that, I never cared about myself. You ensure that you love yourself the most. Nobody comes before you. Uh, if you love yourself, you'll be able to love others. And she ensured that she gave us those lessons. Very strong. She was a teacher by herself, so inculcated a lot of qualities in us as disciples, as disciples of life. So uh, I think there's never a good time to say bye. Nobody is ever ready to lose their parents, and it's always difficult for everyone. Uh, but at the same time, when I look back at it, I also feel um, she gave us as much as she could till the last moment as daughters, and yeah, that's that's how she was. And your mother is always the special person in your life.
Yes. And I think I think you are honoring her memory in so many ways and living her legacy. And if I were close to you, I would give you a warm hug and give you lots of love. Is there something that you would like to tell other young caregivers? For the longest time, I didn't accept the fact that I was the caregiver. I kept telling that my mother was the primary caregiver, and I was like a distant, caregiver to a caregiver. But I am delighted to see that you see yourself as a caregiver because that is a great step. What would you tell some of the other younger caregivers?
Uh, okay, so I think it's very difficult to summarize everything, but my top two pointers to all caregivers, and especially the younger ones, would be um, as much as possible, reach out and seek help. Uh, you may not find friendship necessarily at your age in your circle. I found my friends who are quite older to me. Like I have friends who are 50 years old and age doesn't matter to us. I reach out to them and we have become friends. So reach out to people whom you feel will be able to guide you and support you and always seek help.
Mm.
The second one would be in this social construct, if you have a lot of baggage that, as an ideal daughter, as an ideal son, as an ideal kid, I'm supposed to do 10 things. And as an individual, if you're not able to do all 10 things, don't be harsh on yourself.
Mm.
Uh, that's not going to help you or the person you are taking care of. Do as much as you can and seek support. And I also realized taking counseling or therapy, which is becoming better and normalized even now, but still a lot of people don't consider it to be a good thing or are apprehensive of it. I really feel therapy, counseling, reaching out to people who can guide you through your emotions is a very good step. So take that. Don't be hesitant, and don't be hesitant of loving yourself, taking some time out for your own self, because your sanity will ensure that the patient you are taking care of uh, also feels that, it makes a huge difference to take a breather, to take time for yourself. I mean, you can't completely become a martyr for somebody. So yeah.
Smriti, as you were speaking, I was wishing that my younger self had your very wise advice when I was a caregiver so many years ago. I am very grateful and very appreciative that while this is fairly raw and new and recent, uh, you're here. That
uh,
says something about,
I'm glad that, Bhavna, I have you and your team, and indirectly and directly involved people, individuals with caregiver, because uh, I'm pretty sure the younger version of you didn't have that kind of support, but I do. So I'm the lucky one. All of this comes from this environment.
well, I'm speechless and I'm so glad that we had this conversation. And I hope that we will reach out to many others and your conversation will inspire many others to share their stories. We will probably have another longer conversation. And here's a big hug from this Bhavna.
Hug to you too. Thank you so much for having me. I really hope it reaches out to people who want to listen and helps them in direct ways.
Yes, I'm sure it.
Thank you so much, Bhavna.
Thank you. You have a lovely evening.
You too.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.